Red room, red room. Hey, I'm Amy and welcome back. I am sorry that is a horrible impression, but today I am checking The Shining off the 1001 movie checklist. If you don't know what the 1001 movie checklist or 1001 movie challenge is, it is basically a challenge I had given myself to watch every single movie on the 1001 movies you must see before you die book. So far, I have checked 156 films off the list. If you want to know more, you can check out a playlist of every single movie I have checked off the list, or the intro video right there. I am also an Amazon affiliate, so if you would like to start the challenge for yourself, watch the movie I'm talking about today, or get ready for the movie I'm going to be talking about next time, you can check the links in the description, and if you purchase anything from those links, I will get a little bit of a kickback, and it will help make this channel so much more awesome. As always, let's get started with a short summary. Jack Torrance, a writer, brings his family with him to the Overlook Hotel when he becomes the winter caretaker. Jack slowly starts to go mad and become violent, while his son Danny tries to warn hotel staff who have gone home for the winter of what is happening using his shining talent.
I can remember when I was a little boy, my grandmother and I could hold conversations entirely without ever opening our mouths. She called it shining.
Going into this, I had heard so much about it. It is one of the very few movies that I have heard anything about. As I always say, in pretty much every single one of these and pretty much every single movie review I do that I have not seen the movie for already, I try to go into the movies knowing almost nothing about them. Try to go in with as much of a clear and open mind with no other outside input, kind of persuading my thoughts and opinions of said movie. Now, this one I had heard so much about. It always scared me, the thought of it, and honestly, I was really nervous to watch it because, oh, hi Luna.
Oh, hi Mark.
So, where was I? When I started watching this, I was very nervous for it because of all of the hype and buildup of this being one of the scariest movies ever. And I've slowly, this past couple years, since I started this channel, I've been getting a lot more into horror movies. There are some that I probably will never watch, and I've talked about this multiple times. I will never watch any torture porn movies ever again. Hostel and Martyrs really screwed me over. I am not a huge fan of the Saw franchise. I have seen, I believe, the first one and the fifth one. I probably will never watch any more of those again. I will never watch any of the Conjuring movies because I'm not like a super big fan of that kind of weird ghosty type stuff like Conjuring and The Nun and whatever else is in that thing. But The Shining is kind of one of those supernatural movies like The Conjuring, so I was very kind of nervous to watch it, but it also intrigued me on such an intense level because it is very much more of a psychological horror. There are some very scary visuals in this, but it does come down to more of the psychological horror aspect of it, which is what Stephen King was intending when he wrote this book. It is, as he put it, quote from the book, a little story about writer's block, and it very much so is. It's about isolation and the feeling that you can get when you are on a creative block, which a lot of people I know, writers and YouTubers, filmmakers, they all can feel this. I have felt it sometimes when I'm trying to come up with a video idea, but probably not to this extent. I don't feel as isolated because I know there are other people who are feeling the same way and kind of going through the same things, and I can always bounce ideas off of some of my other creative friends, and they can always give me some ideas as well. So that I don't feel as isolated with, but you do get this feeling of claustrophobia, which is very prevalent in this movie, and it's just this very intense, haunting feeling that you get throughout this entire movie. Not necessarily like in writer's block in general, but throughout the entire film, you do feel what Jack is feeling. You do feel this really crazy, intense madness that is just taking over him.
Just a glass of beer. Hi, Lloyd. A little slow tonight, isn't it?
So with all of that being said, there is one little tidbit I want to talk about that I know probably everyone knows, because it is so much talked about when it comes to this movie, is the fact that Stanley Kubrick made this movie based on a Stephen King novel. Don't know where I was going with that. Stanley Kubrick made this based on a Stephen King novel called The Shining, and Stephen King hated this movie. He said that because of Kubrick's religious skepticism, it made it impossible for him to grasp the sheer inhuman evil of the Overlook Hotel, looking instead for evil in the characters. In the end, this gave King the feeling of only a vaguely overall supernatural tone. And I can kind of see that. I haven't read The Shining, the actual book, so I don't know what to really compare it to in that sense. So please let me know if you have read the book and watched the movie, if there are more of a spiritual undertones to it. And I know through the lore of Stephen King, a lot of his novels are interconnected in some ways. So I think The Shining is also a trait that Bill and It has. I know that It is very overtly supernatural in some aspects, especially going into this part 2 that they're making right now, at least the current movies. It's going to be a lot more supernatural, and that the book is supernatural, and it is this being that's, I don't know, it's kind of weird to get into. I kind of know a little bit more of the lore behind It than I do The Shining, and I do know though that they are somewhat connected in that way, so I feel like there might be a little bit of a supernatural disconnect that I'm not getting from this because I haven't read the actual book. And now to break down my thoughts on this movie, and I have quite a lot of them. The first one of those, and I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, is the psychology behind it all, the isolation and what it can do to the human psyche. This is the kind of movie that makes me wish I had more than a semester of intro to psychology, that maybe I took a couple more classes. It amazes me, psychology amazes me, and I do wish I took it more. You really how you go crazy, and it could just be the hotel and everything that had happened at the hotel that made Jack go crazy, but it's also the loneliness and the isolation with only the 3 of them there, plus all of the stories that Jack had been told at the beginning of the movie of what had happened, the fact that it was built on an Indian burial ground, which I don't think really ever came up again, so it really had nothing to do with anything in this movie. It was just built on an Indian burial ground, cool. But they also talk a lot about, and it plays a big part within the movie, is the old caretaker and his wife and daughters that came, and he killed all of them and then killed himself. That plays a big part in kind of to what happens with Jack later throughout the movie, of him going crazy, and because he sees the old caretaker, and Danny sees the little girls. And they don't ever see the wife really, unless she's the lady in the bathtub, which she probably is. It's just all of that stuff kind of plays also into your psyche, what you are told. That's one of the reasons why I don't like to have any information on the movie that I'm going into, because it could alter my thoughts and my vision of what this movie is going to be. So those thoughts and those stories kind of altered Jack's vision of what was happening or going to happen at the hotel. But even with that, this is probably one of my favorite Jack Nicholson performances of all time. It's insane. He is insane. I believe this is the movie that kind of made Jack Nicholson a star. He is so amazing in it. You feel how kind of normal he is at the beginning of the movie, and then slowly, and then just goes crazy. You really feel it, and Jack Nicholson does such an amazing job the entire time. And slightly before Jack starts to go a little bit more crazy, and the events of what previously had happened, the spirits and the Overlook start to really get to him, he has this nightmare that you just kind of see from the outside of him having this nightmare, and Wendy finding him having the nightmare because he's yelling and screaming.
The most terrible nightmare I ever had. It's the most horrible dream I ever had.
It's okay now. Really.
I dreamed that I killed you and Danny. But I didn't just kill you. I cut you up into little pieces.
And he kind of has the same nightmare that the original caretaker, or to phrase it differently, he has the nightmare that he is the old caretaker, and what the old caretaker did to his family, Jack is going to do to his family, or in the dream he does to Wendy and Danny. And that's a little bit more why I think that it's more of the story that influenced Jack than kind of this spirit in the hotel. And I think another reason why Stephen King didn't like this movie as much, because you don't really get the overall spirit of this evil spirit doing this to them. It's more of stories told to Jack that's kind of messing with his head, and Danny's only really the one that has kind of the psychic ability. But one thing I really wanted to talk about, and this does not have to do with how isolation gets into the psyche, but it's more of the opposite of that. It is Wendy's character and how the perseverance of her spirit, of her protecting herself and her son, protecting them from Jack and all of the crazy stuff, because she is really the last one to experience all of this. Danny was experiencing it from the start while Jack was having his interview with the Overlook. He was already experiencing it because of his shining abilities.
Please. No. Tony, tell me.
So he already knew what was happening. He knew what was going to happen, or kind of was foreboding it, if that makes... I don't think that really is what it's supposed to mean. He was kind of getting little signs here and there. Wendy was getting a little bit of it, but not as much as Danny, and then eventually Jack when he starts seeing things. But I just love the perseverance of her as a mother, as a human being. The instinct to protect herself and to protect Danny against all odds is insanely amazing.
Danny, I can't get out. Run! Run and hide! Run! Quick!
One thing I do want to talk about before getting into the meat of this, which is how Kubrickian it is talking about Danny. Little kids in horror movies are always terrifying. When Danny is talking to the voice in his mouth in the mirror when they're at their original home before they moved to the Overlook.
Tony, do you think that'll get the job? He already did. He's gonna phone Wendy up in a few minutes to tell her.
He was almost on like Damien from The Omen levels of creepy to me, plus like the two little girl twins. Oh, just, I'm not a kid person in general, but it's just terrifying. Although Danny Lloyd, who plays Danny in this, is such a good actor. He's so creepy, but he also is just he's really good. He's really good as an actor. And then the Kubrickian feel of all of this. Stanley Kubrick has a very, very specific style. He makes everything just so perfect. Everything has to be perfect. He does things so many times, multiple takes. He is notorious for doing, was it like a week or more of shooting for the maze scene at the end with Jack running around in the snow, which is insane to me. Like, that is how perfectionist he is when it comes to making his films. And you really see that in a lot of his shots. Every shot feels deliberate, is framed very specifically and perfectly. And he does these amazing long takes that fade match framed into another scene that you know he probably made them do at least 10 times just to get it perfect. And the way he uses cinematography is brilliant. Multiple times he has the character finding something and not showing the audience what it is until the very last moment, just to build the suspense. And he also uses the camera as a POV, but then transitions it into a third-person view just to build suspense also. Like someone's watching another character in the scene, but then the camera keeps moving over and you see the person whose POV it was supposed to be kind of slide into frame.
How do you like it?
And with his storytelling, he builds suspense yet again with only showing and telling bits and pieces of what's happening until the very last moment. Like when Jack takes all of the spark plugs, I believe, out of the transistor radio, and then he breaks the engine of the snowcat. You don't know that he destroys the snowcat until Wendy goes to see it and Jack tells her that he destroyed it. That is the true moment when you get how isolated and truly out of reach and unable to call for help that they are. The obvious choice for a clip for this movie would have been a portion of the maze scene that they took weeks to film. The blood coming out of the elevator, red rum.
Red rum. Red rum.
Or any of the countless iconic scenes throughout this movie. But the clip I chose is one that really just instills the fear that you feel throughout this entire movie, but also really portrays just how crazy Jack has become.
Danny! Danny boy! Danny!
And that is all I have for The Shining. As always, these are just my opinions, but I would love to know yours in the comments down below. Let me know what you think of The Shining, which Stanley Kubrick movie is your favorite, or even which Stephen King adaptation is your favorite. If you want to know which films I have already watched, or just follow my progress along in general, there's a link to a Google Doc in the description down below with a list of every single movie I have checked off so far. For the last 1001 movie for Scary Movie Month, I'm going to be watching a movie that I know I will probably enjoy because so many people have told me it is right up my wheelhouse of the type of horror that I like. I just have always been too scared to watch it, and that movie is The Cabin in the Woods. But that is all. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really truly do appreciate every single one of you. Let me know who you are in the comments down below, and let's be friends. If you enjoyed this, leave a like and subscribe if you're new, because I love talking all things movies, TV shows, filmmaking, film history, all that fun stuff, and I'll see you next time. Bye!